Yay! What is up, everyone? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode 314.
Pie.
Hey! All right. I'll take it. We're very excited about tonight's show. We get to welcome back to the show Coree Woltering, who is fresh off of an FKT on the Ice Age Trail.
A massive FKT.
Massive FKT. Like 21 plus days on the 1,170-mile Ice Age Trail. So we're so excited to talk to him about this huge adventure, the undertaking that led up to it, the things that he's doing for charities right now. He's really, really doing some fantastic things. We'll talk to him all about it on today's show. So thank you, everyone, for joining us on Ginger Runner Live, episode 314. The show begins now.
Ginger Runner.
Yay! What is up, everyone? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode 314. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy Mondays to spend a little bit of it with us. We're very excited about tonight's show.
Yes.
We've been following this adventure for weeks now, from afar, like on Instagram and his blog and stuff like that. But our guest tonight, Coree Woltering, just completed days ago the 1,170-mile Ice Age Trail, attempting an FKT. I'm going to spoil it. It's a close one at the end. It's actually like surprisingly close. But we're going to talk about that in today's show. So Coree's going to be joining us, talking all about his FKT attempt on the Ice Age Trail, some of the stuff he's been doing for charities in the weeks and months prior to this, a little bit of his last year. It's been a couple years since we've had him on. We just looked.
Over 2 years.
Just over 2 years. We last had him on after, or it was just before Western States?
I think prior to Western States.
Okay. But before we introduce our wonderful guest tonight, I want to just quickly mention we last had Coree on talking about the 2018 Western States. The 2019 Western States, Kim and I were able to go down and film some of the runners there. This last weekend, we did drop a movie following fellow North Face team athlete. Our guest tonight is a North Face team athlete. But Caitlin Gerbin ran 2019 Western States, and we documented her race there. That movie just dropped on this channel on Saturday. So if you'd like to go watch that, you can do so maybe after this live broadcast. But just wanted to give a quick shout out to Caitlin there. We'll maybe have her on a future episode and talk all about that.
Yeah.
We also have some individuals we'd like to thank at the top of the show for helping make this show happen. That is our Patreon squad, our GR crew. It is because of them that we're able to do live shows every Monday, our daily live show for Patreon, our weekly reviews, movies, all of this. So thank you to our Patreon crew, 2 individuals in particular at that top tier. Brian Sands, longtime supporter, incredibly inspiring story. He's currently training for some huge races. It's really cool to be following his journey. So shout out to Brian Sands. And Chris Lee out of Hong Kong. Chris has been a longtime supporter as well and does some great things for the community in the Hong Kong region, trail running, showcasing the trails in the region, supplying people with gear, all that stuff. So shout out to those 2 individuals for helping this show happen. Thank you very much. Without further ado, I just want to get into it. I don't want to waste any more time. But before we introduce Coree, there's one more person I have to introduce.
Let's get into it. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
right.
yeah. I forgot. Talk about.
Hi, everybody. Kim Tashima Newberry here, as always. If you're new, welcome. We are live. We're going to be bringing Coree on in just a second. Because we are live, you can ask Coree questions. So pop your questions into the chat room. I'll be in there for the duration of the show.
Yeah, the topic of conversation surely is going to be around the Ice Age Trail, but we're going to talk about a whole bunch of things. So if you have any questions for Coree, drop them for the live show. Without further ado, I would like to welcome, I believe from Illinois. I believe he's back home in Illinois.
We shall see.
We shall see. I'm drinking a beer from the closest region to Illinois. It's New Hampshire, so I'm not quite there. But it's in honor of our guest tonight, Coree. It's so great to have him back on the show. Coree Woltering.
Yay!
How are you?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me on, you guys.
Are you recovered? How's the body feeling? Because you're just a couple days out of this thing at this point.
Yeah. Recovery is definitely going to be a long, slow process, I think. It's overall, I'd say I feel pretty good, but I'm still having trouble sleeping like on a normal schedule. And then when I wake up, I still feel like I need to be out on the trail right away. So it's really weird to actually sleep for a full 8 hours right now. But yeah, other than that, I mean, I feel pretty good.
It's It's a similar experience we've heard from other multi-day FKT attempts from people, is like you get on this schedule where sleep is a luxury, and especially towards the tail end where you're just all your time is spent like, I just got to keep getting miles in any capacity. And it's like you get done with it. And this is what we've heard.
The adjustment
back to normalcy.
Introducing yourself back into
is a bit of a struggle. Has it been like that every day since? Do you feel a little bit of like normalcy yet?
Today is probably the first kind of normal day I think I've had. But it was like that for the first 5 or 6 days after. And it's also just really funny because now when I'm sitting down to actually eat dinner, like I can sit down and eat and not have to worry about how many minutes it's taking to eat. And it's like, I'm not eating breakfast on the go. I'm not eating lunch on the go. So it's just been a lot of those like small little things that have started to add up, and it's actually really nice.
Are the meals different now too? I'm assuming you're able to eat like real food rather than nutrition, right?
Yeah. So I actually did mostly real food on this FKT attempt. But it was a lot of just hamburgers and like crispy chicken sandwiches from the Quick Trip gas station. And just food like that, where I could basically keep it in the wrapper and put it in my hydration vest and just go.
Yeah.
And so, because I was eating, anywhere from 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day, usually more on the 8,000 calorie end. So it was a bunch of just like handheld foods and things that could be put into a bag or a container and eat on the move.
I can't wait to talk about that. Like I already just
There's already like food questions in the chat room.
I already want to jump into the 6,000 to 8,000 calories of like packaged. How? We'll get to it. I know we will. I want to back up. Obviously, it's been a couple years since we had you on the show. You have transcended. You've done so much since then. Huge races, traveled internationally, joined Team North Face. There's been a lot that you've been accomplishing in the last couple of years since we last had you on. But again, following you last year, I noticed that you had a couple moments of health issues. What happened last year? You mentioned it just pre-show there in California and stuff, but what were you able to get to the bottom of it? What was going on, and were you able to get on top of it?
Yeah. So like last year is definitely a learning year for me, just because it was the first time I was going to be racing internationally. And it was also some higher profile events. And I started out the year in Hong Kong and got food poisoning in Hong Kong, and dropped out of that race and actually fell asleep in the aid station. So like, not only was I just like basically throwing up everywhere, but I was just so tired from jet lag and didn't get there early enough, and just kind of figuring that whole situation out. And then in Peru, a couple months later, I ended up getting salmonella and dropped out of that race, ended up in the hospital there. And so it was just like this string of like one thing after another. And then I finally got in a couple decent races, and then went to Ultra Trail Mount Fuji, and it was the year of the snowstorm. And so I was
storms.
Yeah. So I was at mile 90 when they canceled that race. And so it was just like, it seemed like this never ending cycle of like, I'm almost going to get something right. I'm almost going to get something right, but just wasn't quite getting it. And then finally I was back in the States for a while, had a couple decent races, and then was out at Broken Arrow and was going to do all 3 races there. And basically got back to my hotel room after the vertical kilometer. Something just didn't feel right. I wasn't feeling great. And I ended up passing out in my hotel room and went to the ER.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So it was like, what's going on? Like, I had a super tight chest. I was all sweaty, like shortness of breath. I was like, I don't know. It felt like I was having a heart attack or something. So I go to the ER. I went and had a bunch of tests done and blood work done. And they're like, everything's totally fine. They're like, your blood is great. Like all of your vitals are good. Like everything seems okay. And it was like, like what could possibly cause this,
Yeah.
'Cause I've raced at altitude before and it it didn't seem like it should be that big of a deal. And I mean, I was pretty fit at that point. And they're just like, have you ever had a panic attack before? And I was like, no. I'm like, I literally go and train and race in really cool places, and it's really fun, and I'm not nervous about racing or anything. And they're like, I don't know, like it could have just been a panic attack. And I was like, probably not. Like, and they go, well, you know, stress can cause your body to do some weird things. And it was funny because I was just like, I'm not stressed. and the doctor just goes, do you hear the tone that you just used when you said you aren't stressed? And I was like, I don't know, I'm not stressed. Like, I'm really not. And they're like, you just need to slow down.
Yeah.
So I didn't run the rest of the races that weekend, went back home, got in to see a cardiologist. They put me on a monitor for 2 weeks. And
I remember that, seeing pictures and stuff. You were sharing some of that experience.
Yeah. And like everything was good. Like everything checked out fine. They said that I was okay and ready to go back to like a normal amount of training, which is just funny because at that time I was also signed up for Eco Challenge Fiji, which is going to be taking place in September. And so my summer was basically a series of races and training events getting ready for Eco Challenge, because I had to learn a bunch of skills that I didn't have before basically last summer.
Right.
And so as they're telling me, you know, like chill out, I'm actually over here flying and learning how to sail and how to rock climb and like all these other things. And it was just this really funny mix of like, okay, I am like chilling out in the most like intense way possible.
I'm hearing you say like, first, from Broken Arrow, I can only imagine getting that diagnosis and having a doctor say you need to chill out. When you have 2 races in the next 2 days, you have a calendar full of like big training, and to be told maybe slow down a little bit, telling an ultra runner to slow down or take things down a notch is like, it's impossible.
Absolutely.
You can't stop, right? Like when you start running the distances that you're running, it's like you can't really stop. So I'm super curious. One, hearing about the Eco Challenge is like, what drew you to that? Because there are so many disciplines associated with that event that if they're in your wheelhouse, great. It's par for the course. But if you have never sailed or never rock climbed or any of that sort of thing, it's intense stuff.
Yeah.
What drew you to that?
So last year, early in the year, Cliff, who ended up being our team captain for Eco Challenge, he heard they're bringing the show back, and he's like, you know, I'd love to put together the first all African-American team to race Eco Challenge. And so he found all of our team members through Instagram and basically was just like, who are these African-American people that love to do crazy stuff in the outdoors? And I was one of the names that popped up, I guess. And so it was just really funny to get this message like, hey, Eco Challenge is coming back. It's going to be in Fiji in September. Would you like to race? Because I was like, I don't even know where Fiji is. And I know what Eco Challenge is, and I think it's pretty crazy. And then I said yes.
That's all. I mean, you're describing this, Corey, and I'm going, all you need to do is just say yes. This sounds awesome. This sounds super cool. Because I forgot that this was going to be the first one that they were filming, right? Mm-hmm. They were bringing the show back, which is a show that I grew up watching and going, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
Is it still, did they end up filming the event?
Yeah, they had it actually airs on August 14th on Amazon Prime. So they're doing a 10-episode series on it. Super
cool. I'm hoping you're on all 10 episodes.
I hope so.
Nice. I do want to move forward in time now because obviously a lot has happened in the last couple of months for you and the world just in general. Before we get to start talking about the big run that you did, raising money for local charities and the FKT, we do have, again, live questions. We're taking live questions from our viewers tonight. So if you have questions for Corey about any of this stuff, ask, and Kim will drop them from the chat room into this section. Go for it. What do we got?
Yeah, a question from, so a lot of these questions are about the FKT. So I guess we'll just dive in and then we'll dive into the story.
Mm-hmm.
Great question from Marie Claude in the chat room. Marie Claude asked, with all that's going on in the world, Black Lives Matter, the pandemic, and so on, was it harder to get and stay in the right mindset to attempt an FKT?
Yeah, that is a great question. And the George Floyd incident happened probably, I want to say like 4 days before I was supposed to be starting this FKT.
Yeah.
And so at that time, I don't think I necessarily realized how big of a movement this was going to start. And so it was kind of like I thought about it a little bit, whether to go ahead and do it or if I was going to push the FKT back, and decided to go ahead and do it just because of many other reasons. But it was kind of distracting, I guess, to have to get that mindset when I was going to be running through northern Wisconsin, which is not necessarily known as the most diverse area. And some of those areas are just very, very remote. But the start of the Ice Age Trail is only like an hour north of Minneapolis. And so I knew that there's just going to be a lot of things going on and probably high tension. But I guess part of it was just like, okay, I'm here for this FKT, still try to focus on it. And then, as we've kind of said, as I was raising money for Feeding America, that was another thing that kind of kept me focused on moving forward with the attempt.
Were you getting updates? Were you requesting updates and stuff? Because news was every minute of every hour, things were developing here in Seattle, Washington, Minneapolis, across the country. Were you getting those updates? Were you asking for those updates?
I was not necessarily asking for the updates, but I was definitely getting the updates. And part of that was just like the Ice Age Trail does go through like the town of Madison. It goes pretty close to Milwaukee. So there were going to be some times where we could potentially have to like think about this in terms of like the route that you're on. Like, okay, like let's make sure that there's not an issue like right there. But not only with that, it's like it just kept building and building and building. And the North Face is also putting out things on social media about like, racism is wrong, like stop racism and different things they wanted athletes to be doing. And it was like I wanted to be part of that, but I also wanted to make sure I was staying focused on getting this done.
Do you think that your run, we can get to this more too, because I don't want to encapsulate all of it yet when we are just getting scratched on the surface here. But do you think your run is able to sort of transcend just an FKT, one, by being Black and a member of the LGBTQ plus community and it bringing awareness to that and what you accomplished at the same time? Do you think that your run is able to transcend being just a typical FKT and it's something really special?
Yeah. It's like June is also Pride Month. And so with that, I just felt like it was something that I really should do because, yeah, the mainstream media loves to just point out everyone's differences and kind of almost, it seems like it's almost like promoting the division in the country, I guess. Whereas I felt like this could be something that could be used to bring everybody together and just kind of be that positive story out there when there isn't necessarily a ton of positiveness going around at the time.
One thing I want to point out here is that during the last, even after the pandemic started, Coree took it upon himself to raise money for multiple charities and do really, really wonderful things for his community and for America and beyond that. So I want to talk a bit about leading up to the FKT attempt. You did, I believe, did you call it the Big Run for Small Business?
Yes.
And it basically running every street in your city. You accomplished that. You raised $13,000 for local charities. How was that? How was that response? Did the community come out to support? Were you running alone, or did you get people to follow you through the whole thing? And what was that experience like?
Yeah, so Big Run for Small Business ended up being about 204 miles that I did starting on April 1st and ending on Easter Sunday. And we kind of came up with a contest where as I was running through your neighborhood, if you would like come out and take a picture just like from your front porch or your front lawn, Then if you'd post it to my athlete page or tag me in it, whatever, then you'd be entered into just a drawing for like different gift cards and stuff that we were giving away. But then, you could donate to it. And we ended up raising about $13,000 for
So awesome.
in a 2-week period. And with that, we took that money and bought gift certificates from the local small businesses that were shut down due to COVID. And then we gave 60% of that to frontline healthcare workers and first responders. And then the other 40% went to some of the small businesses that we couldn't necessarily purchase from, but we could still give gift certificates to their employees as just kind of like a little something to help them get by for a little bit. So that was really fun and awesome. And then that's kind of what sparked the idea of this FKT.
I was just going to ask if this 200-mile run every street was a secret training for a 1,200-mile FKT attempt on the Ice Age Trail. Do you feel like those miles transitioned into training? But comparing road miles to trail miles it's tough. But did you use it as training secretly?
I really hadn't planned on doing the Ice Age Trail at this point, but then like after doing Big Run for Small Business and just kind of being bored at home, I was like, all right, let's go do something else. So I tossed around a couple FKT ideas and then started talking with my coach, Jason Coop, and it basically turned into this idea of like, well, you have 3 weeks right now where you could go after this FKT and you have, crew that can also be there with you for it. So now might not be an awful time to do it.
I can't wait to talk about this FKT attempt because I know very little about the Ice Age Trail except from friends who have run sections of it, raced on it. Caitlin Gerben, I think, used to train on it or grew up nearby, and I know that you use it as training. What is sort of your connection to the Ice Age Trail, and what is it that draws you to it and drew you to this FKT attempt?
Yeah, so the Ice Age Trail for me just kind of ends up being one of my home training grounds because for me to go from, front door to the Ice Age Trail is probably maybe an hour and 45 minutes or so. So not necessarily an awful drive to get to the Southern Kettle Moraine area. And so I just spend a lot of summer days on that trail. And my husband also skydives in East Troy, Wisconsin, which is about 15 minutes from the Ice Age Trail. So like when he's skydiving, then I'll go up and I'll be running the trails up there. And usually it's like a 2 or 3 day period that we're up there. So
Sure.
So I've spent the last couple of years just really exploring the Southern Kettle Moraine area. And then going up to Devil's Lake, because that's one of the best places you can get some of the climbing in the Wisconsin area. And so it basically just became like, if I've seen these sections of the trail, like I just wonder what the rest of it looks like.
Yeah.
And so I was like, let's go for it sometime. And I didn't realize that sometime was going to be 2020. I thought it was going to be like 2025.
Well, one thing, I mean, just going off the photos and videos that you've shot and kind of shared on social media and stuff like that, again, just visually seeing the trail, it looks like some sections do compare to something like the AT and some sections kind of compare to the PCT. But it also looks really wild in spots, like unmaintained, and route finding can be an issue. You're following yellow blazes and stuff like that. Is the trail really well established? Is there a season that suits doing an FKT attempt? Or did you just choose this time specifically because it's good time as any? I've got the miles under my legs. Let's do this.
June is definitely not a great time to do it.
Well, why is that? Why is that? Is that because it's just starting to be summer?
Yeah, so it's just wild. Like if you do it in June, I mean, you have all of the growth that's happening. You have ticks and mosquitoes, and you're going to have a ton of water. You're going to have a ton of mud. Like the first 350 miles of this are always just kind of brutal. But I feel like if you would choose maybe early fall, you'd probably have a little better conditions, probably not much of a difference. But one of the big things that was also kind of an issue for this was during COVID, volunteers are not allowed to go out and do any trail maintenance on the Ice Age Trail.
Oh.
So starting like March 15th or whatever, volunteers had to stop doing any work on it, and they were not allowed back onto the Ice Age Trail until May 28th.
3 days, like 3 or 4 days before your attempt.
Yeah. So we had actually been up there in early May just doing a little bit of scouting on some of the north and northwest stuff. And I really started to wonder if, June was going to be a great time to do it or not, just because there are a ton of trees that were down. The growth was just going insane at that point. And one of the big things with the yellow blazes is there's some bear activity up north also. So they'll sometimes knock off the yellow blazes. And so yeah, it was like, all right, like we're doing this in June and we'll just see what happens. But no, it was fun.
I love that you wouldn't want it to be easy, that it's like, let's pick probably one of the roughest seasons to attempt the trail after months of no maintenance and probably very little foot traffic on this thing. For locals, is it common to through hike the Ice Age Trail, or are there sections that just never get touched regularly, or what's the sort of backstory?
I'd say that more people section hike it, just because if you're going to section hike it, you can actually do that, take a Saturday and Sunday and go knock out decent chunks of it, and still have a decently normal experience with it. Whereas if you're going to through hike it, it takes quite a while to get it done if you're not going for like an FKT. And it's, I don't know, I guess that section hiking it would be a lot more, I don't want to say more fun, but there are certain days that I probably wished I was section hiking it rather than going for the FKT.
I guess technically you were section hiking it, but in much faster sections. You just happen to be doing, a bunch of miles every day. Before we start getting into the day by day and how these stories played out and more specifics as to the journey, let's get to some of these live questions. Kim, what do we got?
Yeah, a question from Deb. Deb says, Corey, going into the FKT attempt, knowing you're going to burn so many calories, did you try to gain weight or pack in a ton of calories in the days or weeks before the FKT attempt?
Good question.
No. So I basically kept my diet pretty close to normal leading into it. The few things that I did do differently were, I was experimenting with different canned foods that I could eat without having to cook them. And luckily having a bathroom close to home, in case I needed it. So I was able to figure out like, okay, I know that this will always work. I know this will always work no matter what. And then I don't really think I found anything that didn't work. But there are definitely some that sat well more than others. But yeah, I didn't try to gain weight and just didn't try to pack in extra calories. It was basically just like, all right, that you need to eat 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day, depending on how hard you're going. And that will kind of stop the weight loss.
I don't think I've ever heard a guest on the show reference eating canned food and like testing with canned foods just to make sure that it would work. And I'm assuming that's because you wanted to pack up the van with food that wouldn't spoil. Is that kind of what you ended up doing? Is just buying a bunch of canned food?
Yeah. So we bought a lot of like canned chicken and stars soup and SpaghettiOs with meatballs. And yeah. And it's like, it's one of those things where I just knew that those are two foods that would always work. And then with like the breakfast croissants and the cheeseburgers and chicken sandwiches, if we were ever by a Quick Trip, then I would go in and basically buy out all of the cheeseburgers that Quick Trip had ready at the time. And so I definitely got some really funny looks from cashiers at the Quick Trip when it's like I walk up with 10 cheeseburgers and 10 chicken sandwiches. And then I'm also like grabbing donuts and Rice Krispie treats and stuff as I'm walking up. And they're like, what are you doing with all this food? I'm like, oh, just running.
Yeah, just running a lot. Maria Dalzot, our resident food specialist here in the chat room, says no shame in the canned food game. And I'm learning this for the first time. We've had other FKT like multi-day guests on the show before, and we do talk about food, and they talk a lot about like, Cliff Bars or prepackaged sort of sports nutrition where it's calorie dense and stuff. But this is the first time I've heard about canned food. It makes perfect sense. I didn't expect to hear SpaghettiOs with meatballs.
It works.
Did you have to heat it, or you just would like pop the can and
no, I'll just eat it.
Papaya.
Just straight out of the can.
That's amazing. I love it. Let's get to one more live question, and then we'll start digging into the day by day.
Yeah, a question from Cameron. Cameron says, what segment of the Ice Age Trail was the most difficult for you?
Oh boy. So the most difficult section was probably the first section of day 2, which it's not necessarily the terrain that makes it hard. It was just all of the ticks and the mosquitoes were just absolutely driving me insane at that point. And I was like 8 miles into my day when I just about told the crew, like, hey, pack it up, we're going home.
Wow.
And that's on day 2. So I don't remember the segment name of that, but it was not a pleasant experience, and definitely had to mentally work around that.
I want to start kind of digging into the day by day, sort of how this unfolded, because you just mentioned day 2, and if things are already getting a little spicy on day 2, I can only imagine how it went from there. The previous FKT, around 21 days, 18 hours. You set a goal of around 19 days, right? Like you went into it thinking this is the goal. That goal was that this is Coree firing on all cylinders for all 19 days, or this is wiggle room. Was that 19-day prediction? Did it have wiggle room incorporated?
That had some wiggle room. I thought that definitely 18 to 19 days would be possible on that trail. And I still think it is. I actually think you could probably get it closer to like high 17s, low 18s. So, yeah.
And was that based off of a certain mileage per day, or did you know that towards the end you try to be doing overnights, and how did that mileage sort of play out to day to day?
It was kind of a mix of mileage per day, but then also knowing that once you get to the second half of this trail, there's a lot of rail trail, there's a lot of flatter stuff,
right.
Where you can kind of really start to pick up the pace. And so one funny fact, though, was my original spreadsheet that had me finishing in like 18 days and something hours or whatever. I forgot that you actually have to start at like 0 on your spreadsheet, and you don't start at day 1. So like 0 to 24 hours is in there. So when I look at the old spreadsheet, I'm just like, I had some really big days planned throughout the middle of this thing, and then realized like I totally just was missing a 24-hour period in there.
Oh no. Did you account for sleep? Did you plan ahead, like I need to get X amount of sleep per night, stuff like that?
Yeah, originally I said that I would hope to get in about 60 to 62 miles a day, or just like 12 to 14 hours, and then shut it down from there and still be able to get sleep, and then still have a little bit of time to eat and all of that. Towards the beginning, we were pretty good about sticking to roughly the 12 to 13 hour mark for being out there every day. Towards the end of it, I mean, I think I pulled like 2 all-nighters in the final 3 days.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The first, let's say 4, 5, 6 days, that sort of thing. How did they, you mentioned day 2 was the day you're like, I'm ready to pack this thing up and call it, just based off of that day. How did you work through that, and how did you get through that first kind of week? And did anything really at that point make you think that it wasn't going to happen?
Yeah. So the first week is all basically like fairly technical terrain, but you're also going to have a lot of mud. You're going to have a lot of roots, a lot of standing water. And so the first week of this is always the most challenging, because if there's something that's going to go wrong, it's probably going to happen in your first maybe 7 to 8 days. And so like for me, it was day 2 where like I came out of the woods after this one section. I had like 30 or 40 ticks on me. And it wasn't uncommon. I mean, like it was like that the whole time, but it would just like, for whatever reason, starting at 6 a.m. on that second day or whatever. And here I am at, 8 a.m. with 30 or 40 ticks on me already. I'm just like, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And so working through that, I was actually talking to a couple people on Instagram, and they told me like, you're going to have some really bad sections for ticks. And they're like, there are a couple ways around this. Like you can either wear pants, and then you can put, long socks on, and then like duct tape around the socks so that they don't crawl in that way. Or they're like, or you could take the duct tape and put it sticky side out and put it around your ankles. And that way, when the ticks fall off of the grass and into your shoes and they try to crawl up your legs, they get stuck on the duct tape. So I was like, you know what? I'll try that out. And it was like a game changer right there.
Wow.
Because I would come out of the woods and I'd have 30 or 40 ticks, but they'd all be stuck on the duct tape and not on me. And so at that point, I'm like, okay, like this is totally fine. And so I like something that was so simple, and it like I almost went home because of the ticks. And then that little hack, changed everything in a matter of minutes. Yeah.
This is amazing. Like
everybody in the chat room is freaking out about 30 to 40 ticks.
Yeah, 30 to 40 ticks. You made me gasp inside just because
ticks are unpleasant and they're...
Yeah. You deal with one and it's like, oh God, like this one tick I'm terrified. 30 to 40. I love that the solution is something it's a MacGyver solution. It is literally through hikers' experience of like nothing works except for maybe duct tape outward.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, brilliant. So
Absolutely.
by what day was that you got that advice and like instantly put it in?
That was just sitting on the side of the trail on day 2, where I was like having this breakdown and telling my crew, like, we are going home if we don't figure this out. And so, but for, it changed just instantly after we did that. So that was awesome. And then like, I don't know, the next few days were just a bunch of mud, a bunch of water, bushwhacking, like grass that had grown up to my belly button and even higher, trees that were down, just a lot of slow moving terrain. And then on day 5, I just rolled my ankle at some point, just in one of those like muddy, watery situations. And like, I don't even remember there being a ton of pain with it or anything. Because like, I don't know, I roll my ankles decently often, but anyway, this one started swelling. And so it was by like day 8 that I had like a baseball size ankle. And so there are just many things in that first section of trail that it was like, okay, this is trying to take you out, and like maybe you should just listen. Like you could easily go home, but I wasn't going to go home.
This ankle roll, I believe, is the one that sort of threw a major wrench into the system, right? This is the one that sort of took you out for a couple days.
Yeah.
So that actually, let's talk about that. So this ankle roll happens. You ended up taking time off from the attempt.
So the ankle roll happens and like totally fine. Like, yeah, it's getting a little bit bigger, but not too bad. I'm like, I can't really run at this point, but I could still hike. So like I just started walking, and then it finally got to a point where I'm like, okay, this is ridiculous. Like this is so painful that like even walking hurts. And so I had never used trekking poles before. And I was like, you know what? I think that we have a simple solution to this. I'll get some trekking poles and I'll just use those for hiking. And it was weird because like going uphill felt okay. But going downhill hurt, and like any sort of like sideways movements would hurt. And we still had a bit of terrain that was pretty rocky coming up. And so I just hiked for a few days of trekking poles. And I mean, instead of covering 50 miles or so a day, I was covering like in the 20s. Like I think I had a 22-mile day and a 26-mile day or something. And luckily, when we were close to Wausau, we had a couple of people that saw that I was struggling a bit on social media, and they reached out and they're like, hey, like we can actually get you in to see a sports chiropractor in the area if you'd be interested in having them look at it. And like, for me, as like, I don't know, like, what's he really going to do, but whatever, like, I hope that this will work. My crew was excited that I was going to go see someone, because they're like, if you have a broken ankle, like, you can't just be out here for the next however long it's going to be.
Yeah.
So I went in and saw the chiropractor, and he gave me his diagnosis of what he thought it was. And then he's like, yeah, we can use some laser therapy on it. And then the next morning I actually went back at like 6:30 a.m. before starting the trail, and he did some of the Graston scraping technique on it, trying to break up some of the scar tissue in there. And that's like the most pain I've ever been in my life. But it at least brought range of motion back to my ankle. And so
Awesome.
so with that, it was like, okay, like this is not over yet.
I won ART for the win.
Good old Graston.
Good old Graston, like digging in there with the tools and it's making Corey shiver. I have so many experiences of just those metal tools being dragged across tissue.
I feel like we all do, and we all can kind of like...
we're all cringing there with you. So this is amazing. You have these signs that are basically like, not the time, the trail's tough. You got all these ticks, like nothing's working out, ankle roll. But somehow you're still logging miles and you're still moving forward in progress. I want to give a shout out to your crew because you're obviously not doing this alone. You have a van. The van is very nice, by the way. Love the stuff on the side of the van and stuff. But you've got your husband. Who else do you have as far as crew that's there to support you and keep you moving here in this moment?
Yeah, so my husband, Tom, and then we had Kevin Youngblood, who is our photographer from Vegas. We brought him in for this because he's also an ultra runner, and he's had experience with multi-day races, and he just really wanted to be part of this. And then I'm also one of our friends here in Ottawa that I've been running with a bit, wanted to come along, so he was there for like 15 of the days or so. And then we had a couple other people that were in and out throughout all of this, like Igor, he's from Madison, and he's been there quite a bit. So, it was just really fun to kind of bring some of these different people together for this, especially in a time of COVID where we've all been like stuck at home for this whole thing. So for everyone, it was like, this is the first time we're all going to be out somewhere. And so, it was just it was fun.
Yeah, and like I remember you saying something on your Instagram just in regards to the trails being open for the first time in 6 weeks, and that was just before you attempted this, like you were just getting some trail time. So I imagine it was a great experience to sort of see other faces and be outside and to be able to experience this kind of as a small group of people out in the middle of the wilderness. I want to talk about the second week and third week here because your ankle. You're on the other side of it. Did it continue to cause issues throughout the end of the attempt, or did it start to subside and were you able to move 100% again?
Yeah, so the ankle became a very interesting problem, I guess, because once my ankle kind of stopped hurting enough, or like once the swelling was going down enough that I could kind of get like full range of motion back in it, like I had been favoring the left side more to take the pressure off of the right. So then I started getting some like shin pain and stuff on the left side. Like the ligament that you use to like raise and lower your foot, like that started getting inflamed. And it was just like, okay, so now we have this thing going on. I'm like, I have an ankle that I still can't really run downhill with. I have a left shin that is now feels like someone's just taking a butter knife and like jamming it in there the whole time. And so then it's like, well, now that the left side hurts, I need to put some more pressure back on the right to try to take some pressure off the left and rest that for a little bit. And then the right shin started doing the same thing as the left. And so it was just like this never ending, like just basically pain circle that seemed to be going on in my lower legs. But then I thought about it and like, if you're limping on both sides, then I guess you're going to be able to limp in a straight line down the road, So it's like, I guess this is like the best situation it could be. At least there's pain on both sides and not just one at this point.
Basically, like, looking for balance and pain as like, oh, good, I have equal pain on both sides now as opposed to hobbling. That's the kind of stuff that, that's grit. Like, that's full on what these FKT attempts are about based off people's stories. Not that I know this, but
all your FKTs?
All of them. 47 of my FKT attempts. I have the fastest on time to the fridge. Go ahead. Questions.
Comment and question from your wonderful teammate Caitlin Gerbin in the chat room. Caitlin says, so much grit, Corey. I can't imagine having all of those issues on day 2 to 5 on a 20+ day FKT and still going for it. What mental tricks did you use to keep moving despite all those setbacks? Yeah.
So for me, I basically would just break everything down into super small chunks. And sometimes it'd be just as simple as I'm going to count to 10 and then I'm going to count to 10 again, because at the end of the day, like, you can do anything for 10 seconds. So even if you have to count to 10 like 1,000 times, you're still moving forward. And then other times it was just as simple as like just telling myself left, right, left, right. Like, if you can just take that step with your left foot and then that step with your right foot, you're gonna still make progress. And so I guess it was more just about being in the moment and moving forward when I could. And then just knowing, like, if I had to stop and ice my ankle on the side of the road, then perfect, because we have this chance to be able to eat some food, drink some fluids, rest up for a little bit, and then go again. But yeah, it was a lot of it ended up being just breaking it down into simple, like 10-second segments.
I don't think we've heard that really described on the show in as clear detail as that, but like just going in 10-second segments, you can do anything for 10 seconds. To cut something down that's 20 plus days long, your brain wants to process the full spectrum of it, the full 20 plus days, but yet you're breaking it down to 10-second intervals, and that's how you get through it, is mind-blowing. Like, that is such a talent that your mind is able to do, Coree, that you're able to literally break it down to 10-second intervals and just keep moving forward. 6 10-second intervals in a minute, and you move forward from there. I love it. I think it's such a great way of, maybe a lot of us can sort of take that and implement it into our ultra training. Let's get to one more live question, then we're going to talk about the last few days. The good stuff.
Cured by Flowers has a great question. What did you do for recovery in the evenings?
Also, I love that username.
Yeah.
Yeah. So recovery was basically, as soon as I said I was done for the day, I would make sure that I had some sort of fluid and some sort of food that I could take in. We were going to be camping, and it just, with the ticks and the mosquitoes and everything up north, it just became way easier to go to a hotel and sleep and actually take a shower. So that was nice. So basically, I'd make sure I ate and drank something as soon as I got into the van, and then I'd put on my compression sleeves. And then when we finally got to the hotel, have dinner, take a shower, and then I would just basically go to bed right after that. Like, some days I'd fall asleep like on top of the bed. Other days I'd actually make it into bed. And then it was just like, all right, just be ready to go once you woke up in the morning. Just very, very minor, small stretches and stuff, a little bit of foam rolling. And then King Buddha has this awesome, like, recovery CBD roll-on recovery that I'd use. And that really helped with a lot of just hot spots and just kind of keeping the legs fresh.
Like a roll-on, like a deodorant stick type of thing? You just kind of put it on the trouble spots?
Yeah. Yep,
that's
just
awesome.
Put it on, arms, legs, whatever, back's hurting. And it was great just because, I mean, like, my legs felt pretty good most of the days.
So that's interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. That made me think of, when did it really click, the routine? So if you're shooting for a certain number of miles per day, maybe some days you don't get that. Some you were getting 20 miles, that sort of thing, and you're in a lot of pain. When did the routine really click in and you were like, okay, I'm in this day to day, and I'm in it for the long haul?
Probably, I'd have to say it's probably maybe 10 days in or so, where everything just kind of clicks and you're like, all right, like, I know that I need to do this, this, and this when I get off the trail. And then when I wake up in the morning, I know I have to do X, Y, Z, and then we're going to be on the trail within, maybe 45 minutes of waking up. And it is also really funny because by day 10, when everything is just kind of really hurting, that, like, you are going to become stronger from this. And at some point, like, your body's not going to hurt as much, or maybe you just, like, kind of accept that that's the new normal and you're just okay with that. But the funny part is, like, as soon as I was putting both feet on the ground in the morning, the pain would start, and it wouldn't stop until I fell asleep. And so it's like you're actively making this choice to be in pain for 18 hours a day or whatever. And that was just like, all right, this is the new routine. Like, it's going to hurt, but I'm okay with that.
I admire anyone who can do these multi-day sort of attempts, because there just has to come a point where, it becomes routine, but you're still dealing with massive amounts of pain and your body maybe not wanting to cooperate as much as your mind does, or vice versa. So these last few days, you you're obviously having to adjust in real time expectations because your original goal was anywhere from 18 to 19 days plus some hours. You are not going to make that. So when 17, 18, 19 days arrives, when does the math start to click in? Like does your crew let you know, like, here's what you got to do? Is your mind in that state where you can process what you got to do? How does it all play out for you and your team in those last 3, 4, 5 days?
Yeah, I think the crew was kind of, they wanted to push, but they didn't want to push too much. They're like, we know you're doing what you can, but like, you really do need to try to get to this spot, or maybe like you need to knock out one more segment before we go to bed. And it was getting to the point where I'm like, okay, but like, we are losing hours that I could be sleeping. And, if your body's trying to recover when you're sleeping, like, I'm just not getting any recovery in. So we're just going to have to hope that my body is somehow recovering while I'm running, which it sounds like it just doesn't seem like it should be happening. But it was just like, okay, like, we are getting to go time. So let's do it. And I knew the math of what I needed to do to be able to get it done. And I just knew that like there are going to be a couple overnights in the final few days. And I knew that there are going to be just some really, really, really uncomfortable days in there.
Yeah. You mentioned, again, kind of going back to your Instagram, because that's where I was following you the closest. You mentioned that the morning started out slow. The afternoons, things started to pick up, and then the night is where you were blazing. So how did that sort of play out through the day? Were you doing long stretches these last few days? Were you doing 18-hour days, 20-hour days? What was the day like?
Yeah. So like, I historically, like, if I'm racing something, I guess I run okay in the morning, but like otherwise, like, I'm not a morning runner. I like to do a lot of my training in the afternoon. Especially in the summer, like, I like to go out in the hottest part of the day and get all my runs and workouts and stuff done then. And so like for this, it was like waking up at 5:30 or whatever and being on the trail maybe at 7 or whatever time it was. I don't enjoy doing that. And I know that like the later we got into this, the earlier I'd have to be out there. But like, I'm totally someone that would rather sleep until like 11 a.m. and then put in work from like 11 a.m. until, I don't know, like 4 a.m. or something.
Yeah.
And then sleep then. But so it was hard, but it ended up being, when we had like 100 hours to go, like 275 miles and 100 hours to go or something. That was basically when I made the choice, like, hey, we're going to have to pull some all-nighters. And I had a good day to get us down to like 3 days to go. And then I had to pull 2 all-nighters in the final 3 days. And so like, I literally was moving for probably 23 of those 24 hours, and then would take a 20-minute nap. And so like, my trick to being able to take a 20-minute nap and then get up and go function that full next day was I would take like one of those Starbucks coffee drinks, and I would just chug it, and then I'd lay down and I'd sleep for 20 minutes and then wake up ready to go. And so like, that's what I was doing to just be able to get those miles in. And I mean, it was hard. Because at that point, like, you're just physically tired, but then you're also mentally tired. And there's only so much that, Red Bull or coffee or whatever can do to keep you mentally in it. But once again, that's where it comes back to, okay, you have 275 miles to go, but you can do anything for 10 seconds.
I need to take a second to recognize Coree's badassery here, because not only did we learn about how to control ticks in a section of trail by using duct tape around the ankles, the 10 seconds at a time is like the easiest, most distilled down version of how to succeed in these things, is just to break it down into 10-second intervals. But then to do the chugging of a Starbucks drink
the old caffeine nap. You do your caffeine, you have a very short succinct nap.
Boom, you're punched with the caffeine punch just as you wake up. Perfect timing, ready to go. I need to write this all down. Or I could,
you can go back and watch the archived version of the show. Yeah.
I am so appreciative of doing these live shows with archive versions immediately accessible. Regardless, this is amazing, Coree, that in the last 100 hours, again, 100 hours and 275 miles, that you were able to continue to move forward despite everything that had happened in the previous 20 days. What were those last few moments like? The last day, I mean, did you know you had it in the bag just that last day? Was there When did you know that you had it? Or was it down to the last hour? Like, how did that work?
There wasn't like a real moment where I'm like, this is definitely happening. I mean, even the last day, because like I put in like I think I put in like 103 miles in under 24 hours with like 2 days to go or something, and then still had like 58 miles to go or something, 57 miles to go. And so of this 158 mile stretch, like the only nap I took was a 20-minute coffee nap in there. And got it done in like 37 and a half or 38 hours. And like, even during that time is like, there's no guarantee that I have this in the bag. Like anything can happen. And like, it went from, I did not have any blisters in my first 21 days of this thing. But then in the final like 50 something miles, we had some crazy rain. We had some really wet sections that were also kind of sandy. And the next thing you know, here we are with maybe 7 miles to go. And I'm sitting in the back of the van changing my shoes and socks because my feet are just soaked, and they've been soaked for the last probably 6 hours or so. And I look down and I just have blisters on both of my pinky toes. And like, they're to the point that like you couldn't really tell that they were toes. And I'm like, do we pop these? Do we not pop these? Like, what are we going to do about this? And everyone's like, do they hurt? I'm like, yeah, they hurt. Like, of course. But I'm like, we have like 7 or 8 miles to go. Like, this should be easy to get through this. And then I'm like, I just left the van again and was getting ready to enter the park. And I was like, I don't think I had been in that much pain like this whole time.
Wow.
And so I'm like, great, here we are with, it should have been an hour of running left at this point. And I'm like, I'm experiencing the most pain I've experienced over the last 20 something days. So once again, I was like, all right, like we'll just get to the finish. We'll get this done. Got out my trekking poles. And it was so funny because as I'm going up the final hill to get to the rock at the top for the finish, it just starts like pouring the hardest it's poured in quite a while. And I'm like, of course it would, like, why not? So it was really funny because things that I thought should take less time actually took quite a bit longer. And then there are certain things that I thought would take quite a bit longer that is like, oh, that was fun.
I want to commend Corey. He mentioned the coffee naps. We also have, or coffee sleeps. Someone in the chat room here, Gator Dave, has a great nickname for these called the Nappuccino. I think it's brilliant. You drink your coffee, you have your nap, you wake up, and you're good to go. But Coree Woltering did set the FKT on the Ice Age Trail, 1,170 miles, in 21 days, 13 hours, besting the previous FKT by 5 hours. So this is what's mind-blowing, is that it did come down to just a handful of hours. 5 of these episodes. That's it. Sitting here and listening to 5 of these episodes. There's a question in the chat room. The question's been in my brain and Kim's brain here. We followed along for the whole thing. Would you go back and ever try this again? Do you have your eye set on another FKT? This experience sounded amazing, life-changing, exhausting, tired. Like, would you ever do this again?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of funny because I really don't know what is next, just because I don't have I'm not signed up for any races. We don't really know when racing is going to resume. Right. But like, I don't know, like I would actually go back and do the Ice Age Trail again, just because I feel like there's plenty of unfinished business with it. So like I learned something from it this time, and I would definitely go back and do it again. But there are also some other kind of crazy FKTs out there that I think I'd like to go after that are probably, I don't know, 2 times as long as this, or maybe 3.5 times as long as this one. So, yeah.
We won't name them at this time, but I think we might have our brains sort of on the same page there. That's incredible. What does your husband think about this? Because I know that he took the time out to be there and crew you and pace you. So when you talk about these future projects, what does he say? Is he like, Corey, we need to talk about that? Or is he behind you 100% and like totally on board?
I think he's on board with it. I think he probably needs probably a lot of time to get over this one. and rightfully so. But it's really funny because I know that from a crewing standpoint, like he was up pretty much the whole time that I was up. Like I think he took maybe one nap in there when I was running. Other than that, he was up, but he also gets up before I do. And he'd like get the van ready every day and make sure things are ready to go. So like this is just as much sleep deprivation for him. And it's also a lot of work of driving and making sure you're finding the trailheads and making sure that, you know, I have things I need when I'm coming in and out and all of that. So I don't know how thrilled he would be for something that's a lot longer than this, but I think I can talk him into it.
Some convincing. If we need, we can write emails. We can get we can get a whole bunch of people to write emails. But it's a very similar experience to kind of what we heard when Scott Jurek was on the show, Jenny Jurek, and hearing about her experience crewing Jerker and the days and nights of her driving around these backcountry roads and just trying to be there when he arrives. And it is such a team effort. So just want to commend you, Coree, on such an amazing accomplishment. 21 days, 13 hours, new FKT on the Ice Age Trail. Put it all out there, dealt with a little bit of everything, learned a lot in the process. So that's kind of what I get excited about, is just how much you learned from this experience. Is like, how is that going to be applied to the next one? But all that you've done for so many different communities in the last few months, just and beyond that, but in the last few months with raising so much money for charities and stuff, Coree, you are truly an inspiration to so many people, and you're doing just incredible things right now. We're very excited to continue to follow along. You are still accepting donations for some of these charities that you were collecting money for the Ice Age Trail. Where can people find the place to give, and how can they support these organizations that you're supporting?
Yeah. So right now we are still accepting money for Feeding America and also the Ice Age Trail. In one of my first blog posts I did about the Ice Age Trail FKT, I put links in there of tracking and the two different places you can donate. The Ice Age Trail is all volunteer based and donation maintained. So I know that with this being a COVID year, they could definitely use some donations. But at the same time, for Feeding America, I mean, basically every dollar donated provides up to 10 meals for people in the States. Wow. And last year, Feeding America provided 4.3 billion meals to people. And so, like, I think it's a great organization and fully support it.
We absolutely love what you're doing, Coree, and we're just honored that you would join us on the show tonight to talk about it. I imagine sleep and food and just trying to get back to some normalcy has been a priority. So just taking a little time of your Monday to join us has just been wonderful, man. We really, really appreciate it. And again, congratulations to Coree Woltering on setting the new FKT.
Yay!
On the Ice Age Trail.
Yay!
Yay!
Yeah,
amazing.
Thank you guys so much. Yeah,
you got it. We are going to wrap up our main show here with Coree. We are going to jump into the after show, the post show with him for just a couple of minutes. So Coree, you stick around, but we have some residual questions here from the main show that whoa. I'm sorry. I hit your mic. I apologize about that.
You're very excited.
I'm very excited. But we are going to move into our after show. If you would like to join us on our after show and ask a couple more questions of Coree before we let him go, it's very easy to do. All you got to do is go to patreon.com/thegingerrunner for as little as $1 a month. You get access to all of our after shows. For $3 and above, we do our daily live stream called The Daily Brew, where we talk about everything going on in the world and running and everything like that. We do it every single day. And we have for the last 82 days.
I think
83 days.
Something like that.
So there's like 83 hours of content that you can go just dive into. But we're so excited to have Coree on tonight. So we're going to move right into the after show after this. Do not forget to register for GRGR, which is a Ginger Runner Global Run. We're in our 5th year of doing this. It's our annual virtual run that we've been doing here for a number of years. But this year, we're giving money back to small businesses as well as artists that were affected by the COVID-19 financially. Those artists include Howie Stern, Matt Trappy, Ryan Thrower, just so many incredible artists, photographers and painters and stuff. We have some great support systems for them. But go to rungrgr.com. You can register. It starts next Monday. It's 7 days. New challenges every day, surprise challenges. So you won't know what they are until that day, which is kind of fun. And I believe that is it.
That's it?
That's it.
Yeah.
We're going to move right into the after show with Coree Woltering. So thank you, everyone, for tuning into Ginger Runner Live. We'll see you next Monday for 3:15.
Mm-hmm.
Man, we're getting up there. All right. Have a good Monday. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
changer.